right. Hey, everybody. Welcome all to fraud examination, to your master's program. If you're just starting your master's program, it's exciting. This is a fun class. So let's talk about it a little bit. So what we're going to do in here, and the only thing we're going to do in here, is prepare for and take the CFE exam. That's it. All right. So today we're going to kind of talk about the way the course will go. We'll talk about what the CFE exam is. We will talk about some tips on preparing for this. We'll talk about how doable this exam is. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I've got 20 practice questions that we can look at. And we'll just kind of get a good start. Now, I posted a file on the course and the materials and things. So maybe. All right, so the materials. So I think the main thing at this point is we need to make sure that we all have at least 6 hours of college credit this semester. All right, that's going to save you a ton of money. All right, so what we need to do, we need to get our stuff first. Some of you may have already done that, and that's good. We're going to allow plenty of time for this. Becomes, as you'll see, very much a self-study type of thing. Y'all aren't going to need a whole lot of me on this. Now, we'll meet and we'll cover all the material together, and I'll tell you, hey, pay attention to this. This is tested heavily, and that kind of thing, and things like that along the way. But really, you don't need me to do this. You'll find out after a couple of classes that you'll be just fine. So we don't have to meet every week. So, okay, so to get going, I'm a little bit at a disadvantage on this because I can't go through this process of applying and everything. So any changes they may have made in the past, I can't know about until somebody gets in there and figures it out. So if there's some things in here that's not accurate anymore, let us know and we'll get it changed, and everybody will have a smoother time getting it done. Heidi, you've done it, right? You've applied. How far have you gotten in this process?
I actually got it today.
Your stuff came in today.
Yeah. It only took like a day.
It only took you a day.
I think I applied yesterday.
Anything in there not true, or huh? You didn't even bother reading that.
I didn't know that was there.
You just went rogue, did your own thing.
Student membership, and then you called them.
Okay, so we got somebody here who didn't even read any of this and just got it done. So I think everybody will be all right. See, I told you you don't need me in here. You're just proving that. But yeah, for those who don't get in there, here's the deal. And if there's something not true, let me know. But you got to be a member of the ACFE. That's the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. You can get a student membership, but you got to be enrolled in 6 graduate hours. So for the class, you need this student membership package, and I got a link for you there. And it's all just a matter of going through their process and applying. Your materials in here are a little expensive. They're 90% of our questions come from this manual we're using. They say that 10% comes from this corporate fraud handbook. I don't remember seeing any questions on the CFE exam that I didn't encounter in that fraud examiner's manual, though. So I just put that on there because that's what they say. This exam manual that we're using will get you there. All right. Here's what the sections are. Financial transactions and fraud schemes. That's by far the easiest one. It relies on things you probably already know. As you'll see as we get into it. That one was a breeze. Law is the hardest one to me anyway, because how much law do we have really? We took a couple of business law courses and that was about it. This gets pretty detailed. Law, you'll spend a lot of time with it. That's okay. Investigation is probably the second easiest one. A lot of common sense stuff there. Prevention and deterrence is kind of weird. It's not hard stuff, but there's some weird questions in there, and it'd be like questions in like, who developed the fraud triangle? I don't know who developed the fraud triangle. I do now, but stuff like that. That's not just walking around knowledge. It's like, according to this study that was done here, what did they say was the most common blah, whatever? I'm like, oh, shoot. So you got to kind of read that section to get all that information. But that's your 3 or your 4 sections. Yes?
Are the books kind of broken out by section?
Yes. Yeah, they're broken out into sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yes. And this is just in my experience, this is what you can kind of look out for. So to me, the key to passing this thing is to be really well organized. Don't get rushed. Don't get to the point where you're like, I just have to get something figured out. I'm skipping this section. I don't have time. Don't get to that point. All right. Take your time. Stay on top of it. Stay organized. Don't get overwhelmed with this. Read the pages, and I say read the pages. Read closely sometimes. Skim through it sometimes. Skip it all together sometimes. You'll get the hang of that. Like, yeah, this is skippable. Any appendixes, skip it. You don't need it. Examples, they're fun to read, but if you're in time crunch, you can skip those. Sample letters and reports, don't bother. Skip that. It's a reference material, right? So you don't have to study every bit of it. Think about, and this is a good tip for any exam, think about what the person making this exam would ask you. This is, humans are writing these questions. What might they ask? If you were making an exam, what would you ask? So as you're reading, you might see something like, there's no way they can phrase a question to ask this. You just move on. Or you read something like, well, that seems like something easy to ask. Make sure you make a note of it. Make notes of things you think are important. If it's something that's obvious and you already know it, don't make notes about it. You already know it. And again, I mentioned you're studying from a reference book. There's a lot of repetition in here. Don't make notes the same thing twice over and over. Keep it concise and organized. I recommend for sure that you type your notes. Y'all may have different study habits, but to me, reading through, typing notes is good because you can go back. There's a lot of repetition. Sometimes they'll add a little to something they had talked about earlier, though, so you can go back and add that in the appropriate section and keep it better organized, especially in the law section. That the law section isn't organized the best to me. They'll talk about a law, and they'll talk about a couple things about it, and then it'll come up again later, and they'll add a few more things about it. So then you're scattered all over the place with it. But if you bounce back and add another bullet point to that law, then you got it in nice, neat format. You don't have to read this more than once. You can't, right? Read it for the first time and the only time. So make the necessary notes that you need. You don't have time to go back and read this stuff. Don't fall behind. Don't rush through it. Now, here's, in my opinion, the key thing. You're going to have a lot of practice questions as part of your prep materials that you get. Do every one of those, all right? You'll see some of those questions, again, identical. Same thing on your exam. Do those. Get an idea of what types of things they ask. Make notes about the things you miss. Those are very important. Coming up on test time, read over your notes. Get to the point where you can just recite it as you read the first couple of words. You're like, okay, I know exactly what that sentence is. Mark it with a highlighter and don't ever look at it again. You know it by then, right? That's the kind of the way I study anyway. Y'all may have a different way. I'm just telling you what I do. I'm bad to put little index cards of certain topics, and I'll stick them in my pocket and carry them around with me. If I've got 5 minutes to kill, I'll pull them out and look at them instead of looking at my phone or something. Near to test time, I got a highlighter out, and as I'm reading those, I'm highlighting stuff I definitely know. And then after I've done that, I've got index cards with unhighlighted things, and that's all I like to study. Nice and organized, very systematic. That's just the way I do it. Y'all might have a different way. Now, last bullet point here. Don't get overwhelmed. Many of these questions you can answer just by using your own logic. And for every 3 you get right, you can miss 1 and still pass. That's a lot of questions to miss. A lot of us are perfectionists here, and we don't like to miss anything. But just keep that in mind. If it seemed, every time I took a section, I'm like, I missed too many on here. And then I go back and look at it. I'm like, yeah, that's probably right. I'm 95% sure. And then by the time I reread through it, I'm like, well, there's only like 4 or 5 I'm not sure about. So I don't know. It just kind of, it seems like you're missing more than you are sometimes. Let me show you guys how easy this thing can be. Y'all are going to like this. These are 20 practice questions. Okay, these are actual CFE questions. We have done 0 studying. We know nothing, right? So here's a 20 question exam. See what you can do with it. All right, so this is number 1, the removal of cash from a victim organization before the cash is entered into the accounting system. What is that? Now this is, do I?
I thought we were answering.
Yeah, we are, yeah. So, you know, this is a little more specific. If you hadn't encountered the term before, you might not know. But, you know, looking through there, you know it's not a fraudulent disbursement. You're not fraudulently dispersing anything. You're taking something, right? Lapping, you probably know what that is. So you kind of narrow it down to skimming versus cash larceny, and those are kind of the same thing. Skimming occurs before it's recorded in the books. Larceny is just grabbing it out of the cash register or something like that after it's already in the records, right? So we say skimming, right? And we're right. All right, that's a long one. These are the ones you hate to see because you're like, 75 seconds, I got to read all that and then answer it, and then you get overwhelmed. But take your time, you got time. Read through that. Now here's a tip. The CPA exam, they're out to get you. They're mean. They're trying to trick you, right? The CFE exam is not trying to trick you, all right? You'll come up across something, you're like, well, that can't be the answer. This seems too easy. It is, all right? They're not trying to trick you. So we got Kane, the authorized signer on his company accounts, has prepared and signed a check, all right? It's payable to the plumber. He gave the check to Baker, his secretary, asked her to mail it to the plumber. All right, so we're taking our time getting all this figured out in our head. Instead, Baker took the check home, signed the plumber's name on the back. All right, so signed somebody else's name. Had her husband cash the check. What is this called? Is it an altered payee scheme? They didn't change who they're paying. Is it a forged endorsement scheme? Yeah, they took it and signed somebody. They endorsed it using somebody else's name, right? It's not a forged maker. It's not an authorized maker scheme. There you go. It's a forged endorsement scheme. You can logically answer a lot of these. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So there we go. Okay, number 3. So we're 2 for 2, right? Got 100 going. White, an employee of ABC Corporation, intentionally issued 2 payments for the same invoice. All right. After the disbursements had been mailed, White called the vendor and explained that a double payment had been made by mistake. She asked the vendor to return one of the checks to her attention. When the vendor returned the check, White took it and cashed it. All right. What is it called? So you look for what of those 4 things describes what happened to there. Shell company scheme, there's no shell company here. Pass-through scheme, doesn't really seem to describe what's happening. We didn't pass anything through anything. Receivable skimming, there's no receivables here. Pay and return scheme, paid, return. They're not trying to trick you, right? We don't know what the heck a pay and, if I said, hey, what's a pay and return scheme? You'll be like, I don't know, but you got all this. What is that? Looks like that describes it, right? We're right. Under Sarbanes, which of the following parties is responsible for establishing procedures for receiving and dealing with complaints and anonymous employee tips regarding irregularities in the company's accounting methods, internal controls, and auditing matters? So, what do y'all think? You need a little bit of background to answer this one, right? And we'll get plenty of talk on the Sarbanes thing, but if you think about maybe what you've heard in the past, Sarbanes is really big and they mention these people over and over and over. What are y'all guessing on this? That I would be split 50-50 between them and audit committee if I didn't have any background on it. Sarbanes is big, big, big on audit committee. That's their thing. So it'd be that. So we missed one, whatever. We can miss 30 of them. So one type of securities fraud involves brokers who engage in excessive trading of customer account to create commissions for themselves and their firms. What could this be called? Excessive trading. They're just trading. Churning, right? They're not trying to trick you. We may not know what any of those 4 words really means if someone asked us to define them, but we're not converting anything. We're not parking anything. We're not, leaving something somewhere. We're not front running anything. We're not trying to get up ahead of anybody, but we are churning stuff out, right? There you go. Which of the following is an internal control technique commonly used in computer applications to ensure that a particular elements between 2 or more data sources are consistent? This one's tough because I don't know between B and C, it could be either of those, right? So we can't just rely on logic on this one. We need to have actually read and remembered that one. I guess it could even be A, right? But they are looking at 2 or more data sources to see if they're consistent. They could be matching, they could be one-for-one checking, they could be sequence checking. That doesn't quite work as well as those other 2. Could even be none of the above, but usually none of the above is more obvious than that. So just got a 50-50 chance on this. What would y'all guess? One-for-one checking, he guesses. You got it. There you go. All right, so now we get into some of the law stuff. You need a little more background to answer these, but say we don't have it. We are asked what the statute is that specifically outlaws the giving or receiving of anything of value for the purpose of improperly obtaining or receiving favorable treatment in connection with U.S. government contracts. So first thing you kind of got to do is translate that into everyday English. That's a wordy little sentence, right? So they've got a law that doesn't allow us to get anything for or give anything or get anything to receive favorable treatment. So what's that kind of describing? I think somebody chimed in on that one. Anti-kickback is right. Very good. So, oops. Anti-kickback act. So, I'll do this if you'll give me this. That's kind of what they're describing there. And by the time you read through the law section, these are pretty obvious. So we'll spend plenty of time with, especially Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We'll spend a lot of time on that. All right, good deal. All right, and then you're like, got to read all this. All right. A manager at a hardware place, which is publicly traded, suspects an employee of stealing, calls the cops. Officer says, we don't have resources to do anything here. But the cop says, hey, you see if you can get in that guy's trunk of their car and see if there's any inventory in there. So the manager does, finds stolen inventory. Which of the statements is true? They could not be in violation of the Fourth Amendment because it's not a government agency. They may be in violation of the Fourth Amendment because all publicly traded companies are qualifying as state actors. They could not be in violation of the Fourth Amendment, but they might be subject to civil liability. They may be in violation of the Fourth Amendment because it's acting at the suggestion of the government. See what I mean? Law's tough. So we don't really have a good background to answer this one, right? We will. The answer to this one is, let's see if somebody tried to answer that. Civil liability, which one is that? Okay, it's a good guess, but so the Constitution protects us from the government. All right, that's the whole the amendments do, and there has to be some kind of government involvement to be, subject to all of that. So the answer is actually there may be a violation of the Fourth Amendment because the cop, a government employee, has gotten involved and say, hey, you should do this. So there may be a violation because of that. We can't know all of them automatically. That's a tough one. But once we study it, we'll know. Stupid discovery stuff killed me when I took it without studying. And it kind of killed me when I skimmed it too. But I realize that, and we'll spend enough time on it to get it all sorted out. Discovery serves which of the following purposes? This one's pretty easy. We may not even know what discovery is, but which of these could sound right? Does it serve the purpose of us understanding and evaluating the details of the opposite side's case? Maybe. Does it serve the purpose for enabling speculative? You can stop there, right? You see the word speculative. We're not going to speculate on anything. We know better. So it's not that. Does it serve the purpose of us being able to gather information that's irrelevant? No, right? So B and C, not happening. D, not happening. It's not all of the above. So it's got to be A, right? Somebody may have chimed in on that. Third one, I don't know if that was in response to this one or not, but I forgot what the third one was now. I already went away from it. Sorry. Oh, the irrelevant one. Okay. So yeah, we'll spend a lot of time on discovery because I feel like it's kind of challenging. Bailey is a CFE being cross-examined in court on expert opinion related to fraud. The defense attorney is trying to trap Bailey on a bunch of what-if scenarios that would cause a distortion of Bailey's opinion. What should Bailey do? All right, you'll learn in a lot of this, you can kind of draw on your TV and movie watching over the years, courtroom dramas and things. This will help you in this course, I promise. A Time to Kill. If you have seen that, if you haven't, go watch it. It's got a lot of the courtroom procedure in it that we can kind of talk about, things like that. So you get a question about courtroom procedure. Think about movies and TVs you watch. They're not always true, but usually good enough, right? So we got Bailey being cross-examined, what-if scenarios. What should Bailey do? Bailey's a CFE who's an expert witness. Should Bailey object? No. Somebody on the witness stand, you don't see them objecting, right? They can't. Should Bailey avoid answering the question by talking about something else? No. Should Bailey look over at the judge and ask for a recess? No. That's all the attorney stuff, right? So that's going to have to be none of the above on that one. Which of the following methods can be used to obtain documentary evidence? Written consent, sounds reasonable. Subpoena, sure. Oral consent, maybe, probably. I figure 1 and 2, I'm pretty confident with, so that makes 3 kind of fall in there with it too. So let's go with all of the above on this one. Here we go. Which of the following is a sign of deception? I love this part of the course where you get into interviewing people in courtrooms and stuff. Which of the following is a sign of deception when displayed by a witness who's being interviewed? Changes in the voice pitch? Yeah. Oaths? I swear I didn't do it. Yeah. comments regarding the interview, stalling for time. So all of the above on this one. Blue is a CFE. Interviewing green, a fraud suspect. When blue asked pertinent questions, green would frequently repeat the question. Why would green do this? Would he just be ensuring that he understood the question? Probably not. Yeah, gaining time to frame the answer, stalling, right? Not trying to frustrate the interviewer, and that's not going to do any good. So yeah. When an individual purchases real estate, he becomes a registrant in which of the following county records? I don't know. Let's see. Real property, makes sense. Tax assessor, got to be there. Property tax, sure. All of the above. When securing a desktop computer for examination, the fraud examiner should first review the files that may be of interest to make sure they are contained on that computer. Does that sound like something you would do? No. It's like, all right, let's get in here and let's dig around in this computer right here and see if that's the one. No. Yeah, you know better than that, right? You got to secure it, preserve it, then do something with it. You got to follow the procedure. Yeah. So was that true or false? That is false, right? Yeah. Baker, a CFE, has obtained an oral confession from a fraud suspect. This person has confessed to committed fraud, and he admitted to smuggling drugs in an unrelated case. How should Baker handle these admissions in the written confession? I kind of have to take a stab at this one, but what would y'all think? Should Baker include them both in the same statement? Take separate statements for each of the separate crimes? Or just ignore the whole drug smuggling thing altogether? Or something else? So it's not something else because this is so specific and vague. I mean, what would the something else be? Which of those three sounds like what you would want to happen if you were involved in this? Which would be the most orderly thing? Separate statements sounds good, right? Separate them out. You got, you're focusing in on this fraud thing, and then you got this drug thing. Well, let's put this over here and do this elsewhere, right? There you go. According to research, most embezzlers decide to commit their crimes because what? What would y'all think? Are they essentially dishonest people? No. They living beyond their means. Probably more often than they just have drug problems, right? It's like, we can't just say, yep, embezzlers, drug problems. That's their problem. No. So yeah, on their means. Which of the following? Okay. Does anybody know who developed the well-known fraud triangle? No, we don't know that. All right. Anybody out there? And y'all are Googling it, I bet. Nobody. Oh, somebody's chiming in there real quick. Cressy, you knew that. I'm impressed. You're right. Yeah. Donald Cressy is the fraud triangle guy. Y'all won't forget that. Y'all might have that as a test question and you'll get it right. Donald Cressy is right. So Donald Cressy is the fraud triangle guy. We'll talk about these other two guys too, but Cressy's the guy. Yeah. Nice work. Given all of the following fraud prevention methods within organizations, which is probably the most effective? You will see this question one way or another, probably 2 or 3 times. This is important. Which of these is the most effective way to prevent fraud? Reduce a way for them to rationalize doing it. How are we going to do? That's not going to be easy, right? Having an open door policy, increasing the perception of detection, or screening employees. That's probably a good thing, but what does that even mean? If I tell all my students I have an open door policy, I'm telling you that so you won't cheat. That won't make sense, will it? How am I going to stop them from cheating? Figure out a way to keep them from rationalizing it? Well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make them think they're going to get caught if they try it, right? So if we increase the perception of detection, I always told my principal's class, I'm like, I'm an auditor by trade. If you cheat, I'm going to catch you because I'm skilled in auditing. Like, that doesn't even make sense, but it scares them. So, so yeah, make a note of that and put a star by it. You'll run into that several times. If you have a system set up to where they think they're going to get caught, they're going to stay in line. I remember an audit client had a video camera sitting above the time clock where people punched in. I don't think the whole thing even worked. Kept them in line though, right? All right. Lane, a CFE, conducted a fraud examination at Blue Corp. The hardest thing about these is keeping all these names straight, by the way. So we got CFE, Blue Corp, and then we got Betty, who's a suspect in some money disappearing. CFE couldn't prove it. Later, the CFE discovered that Betty had been recently hired by someone else, another client of his. Under the Code of Ethics, Lane must inform Red Corporation. All right, think about this. We think this person stole money, but we couldn't prove it. Now they're being hired by somebody else. According to ethics, are we going to go say, hey, we think they might have stolen something, but we didn't prove it? No. We must not do that. It's part 2, so that's got to be it, right? Part 3 says, inform them if the evidence is clear and convincing. No, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You must not. There you go. We got them all right. Good for us. All right, those are old CFE questions. So this is not that intimidating, right? Just kind of reason through them, think it through, put yourself in real life. You know, what would you expect to be the case? Would you do this? Would you expect somebody to do this? What would you want them to do? A lot of these can be kind of logically answered. The law ones, though, a little trickier, but it's okay.
And then that way I've got the little studying under my belt.
Right.
Spending a lot of time with that thing.
You can do it however you want. Yeah, I mean, anybody can have their own strategy. We're going to start with the easiest section first, just to get a feel for things. You know, feel for this book, how it's set up. I wouldn't want to start with law. I really wouldn't. But we're going to cover law second. So we're going to do it in 1, 2, 3, 4. So it all kind of works out to go in order like that. You know, like the easiest first, just to get a good feel for things, get our confidence going, and then hit law because you'll need some extra time to kind of think about that. Some of that law stuff pops up again in fraud investigation too. So if we skipped over law, then we'd be like, what the heck is that thing? So it works to go in 1, 2, 3, 4 order. But if you want to go rogue and do your own thing, you sure can. I mean, I always tell everybody every semester, you take this exam, pass it, you're done. So it's a good way to finish the class. Just get it done and you got your A. That's all we're doing in here is passing that thing. My main goal is pass the thing. I don't care how you do it as long as you do it honestly. By the way, don't cheat on this thing. You know, we'd make national headlines if somebody gets caught cheating on a fraud examination exam. So don't do that. All right, no cheating on this exam. That would be bad news. You do take each part separately. Yeah, you can space it out however you want to. Yeah. Got one more thing I want to show you. I said there'd be a lot of overlap on the stuff you see in the material you're looking at. So I printed this out from it. This is in the fraud examiner's manual, but you'll see repetition on this so many times. So I just like, you know, here it is one time. And when you see it again, it's like, all right, I already know this, I'm skipping this. General red flags associated with fraud. So you'll see it time and time again. Domination of management by a single person or a small group. practice by management of committing to analysts, creditors, whatever forecasts are out there. Ineffective communication, ineffective implementation, ineffective support, ineffective enforcement of their values, of their ethical standards, obvious stuff. Recurring negative cash flows, inability to generate cash flows. Rapid growth is a big one. Significant, unusual, or highly complex transactions, especially close to the end of the period. Related party transactions, not in the ordinary course of business, is a red flag. Recurring attempts to justify inappropriate accounting or gray area accounting. Formal or informal restrictions on the auditor that limits their access. All right. These are just good general red flags that'll show up one way or the other in several test questions. So I just kind of put that up there at the front for you to kind of have as a ready reference. You got it there. You don't have to not take note of it again every time you see it. So just trying to streamline things a bit. So I'll post that for you, even though it's in your manual. All right. What other questions or comments? Are y'all excited about this? I hope so. It's fun. It's easy-ish. I mean, I feel like it's one of the easier courses you'll take in the grad school. It's useful. I mean, you get out of here and you've got something to put on your resume. I think it'll be great.
So without the personal experience, putting on your resume, can you put CFE on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, put it on there. Well, don't call yourself a CFE, but it's like CFE exam passed. While we're at it, CMA is pretty doable exam too. So while you're in test taking mode, go ahead and knock that thing out too. Just get all those letters. Can't hurt, right? Other questions or comments? Yes. I mean, you know, he's asking how much difference would it be on pay and how big of a deal would people place on having the CFE, and it just differ from people to people. You know, one of the partners of one of the local firms pulled me aside at a meeting we had. He said, I've been really wanting to get into this line of things. He said, on one hand, I'm glad you're doing this. On the other hand, I hate that we didn't kind of get at it first or something like that. I don't know. So he was really interested in getting his workers to get that designation and start kind of getting into the whole fraud examination area. I think he was a little bit worried that all the students here would go to competing firms and kind of knock him out of that. So that would have been really important to that particular person. I would think any audit firm would value that. Yeah, because you're going to have all this additional expertise that they're not probably going to have on all this law stuff, on all this investigation stuff, on all these red flags. So yeah, I think anybody would value it for sure. And, you know, worst case scenario, can't hurt. You know, you can be proud of yourself that you did that. Anytime you have an email signature or your business card, you can have that CFE on there. You know, it always adds a little credibility for sure, even if you're not using it per se in your job you end up in. Yep, question on here. I am a state examiner and a CFE is more important than a CPA with my department. So that's awesome. So you're not a CFE already, are you? Yay, okay, good. It's going to happen one of these days. So that's good. That'll benefit you a lot. That's great. So awesome. And that's good to know. So yeah, I can't imagine anybody not valuing it, because this is just, it's a really important area no matter what. You know, even if you went completely outside of accounting and owned your own business or worked for somebody, you know, these things are going to be important. You're like, hey, that's not appropriate behavior over there. That's a bit of a red flag for that employee. You might want to watch them. Or if you own your own business, you'll know red flags to look out for. You know, my wife owns a business, and you know, I make sure to minimize the risk in those areas, and I'm like, hey, we need to kind of tighten this up a little bit and keep that temptation away, and we need to watch this. You know, it's just simple things that you may have learned in audit class about segregation of duties and stuff like that, and we'll beef that up quite a bit in here. So I think it'll be extremely useful no matter what. I really do. Other questions?
Be
And it's a lot of fun. It's a super fun class. It's fun preparing. And I like taking tests. I'm weird, so y'all may not share the joy that I do, but I had a blast doing the CFE exam. It's fun for me. I'm weird. What else? You don't laugh at me. Y'all are probably weird too. Y'all are excited. I can tell. Y'all are going to love it. You're not excited
I'm excited
to read it? That reading is nothing, I promise. There's nothing to it. Other questions or comments?
I'm not very familiar with audit. Like, I just do know sometimes. So,
Mhm.
like, I'm definitely gonna have to do some studying because I don't know really anything. Like,
You
I don't
have an
know.
audit background.
No.
You'll be
No.
fine. You know, there's no, I mean, you know, there's a little bit of overlap with some of the concepts, but there's not going to be any generally accepted auditing standards that you'll need to know. You're not going to have to know how to test transactions. You're not going to have to know how to gather audit evidence or any of that. So with no audit background, you're fine. This is kind of off to the side a bit. You'll be all right. What else? This will not help you on the CPA exam. It'll help you kind of build that test taking confidence, but you won't see this material on CPA exam. Sorry about that. It's different. Other questions or comments? Okay. I love this class. I love this semester when we get to do this class.